So welcome everybody to this week's Ask Sim Praxis. I'm going to talk a little more detail about PnP search web parts. One of the cool things about this topic for us is that there's pieces for everybody. So like we all come at this from a different angle here. Julie's embraced this a lot in the past. Mark, Emily, Derek, like there's a lot of us who've done stuff with this. So you'll hear a bunch of voices today and a bunch of, I think, different points of view about this. So as we dive into modern PnP search web parts, we'll get started with Mark, and Mark will give us a little bit of history about what they are and why they exist.
Oh, okay, I'll do that. So
yeah, you will.
So you've been using SharePoint for a long time. You know that search-driven experiences, big air quotes, were a big part, a big idea at various times in SharePoint's history. We had the content query web part, which I think came along in SharePoint 2010 or maybe 2007. 2007. And that was a live, like, go out and find the stuff that meets these criteria. The content search web part, I believe, came out in SharePoint 2013, and specifically went against the search endpoints and gave us a way to bring content back that met some criteria. And actually, it was a really nice web part that is no longer around. Neither one of those are. So these modern search web parts are part of the PnP. So patterns and practices. They're open source. They're free. There's a brand new edition or iteration of them that just is coming out. It's version 4 and sort of in preview. But if you've been using these things, you've probably been using version 3. What they let you do is much what you could do in an old search results page in earlier versions of SharePoint. If you ever put one of those pages into edit mode, you know that they're actually not a page.
Did we lose
Mark's audio?
I think so. We did.
They're not a page. What? Oh my God!
His face froze up too. It's kind of funny.
I'm on beta draft. There we are.
Technology. Oh. So search result pages have multiple web parts in them, and these modern search web parts sort of echo what that was. You have a search box. You've got a search results web part. You've got a vertical search verticals web part. And you have search filters or refiners kind of web part. And you can glue those together in different ways or not use them all at once and build these search-based experiences that are not currently available in the larger search that's available as part of Microsoft 365, the search bar at the top of the page. That should be enough of the history.
Excellent.
So Mark and Derek, what can we do with them?
Well, one of the things that I really enjoy, actually, so Greg has a question. Do you need to be a developer to use them? So the answer to that is no. You do need to be an admin to be able to deploy them from the SharePoint app catalog. I do believe provide you don't need to build them, so they've got the package file. So you can just, if you have administrator access to the app catalog, you can deploy them from there. But one of the things that I really find super cool about it is that there is a whole lot of personalization that you can do through the refiners and through the query string. So you can build a search criteria that, for instance, uses a user's profile properties. So you could use their name, you could use their department, you could use their language. So you can basically pull in to even custom properties in a user's profile. One of the use cases where Mark and I use this, we wanted to create a list of events, but we only wanted to show the events for that particular person's area. So if they were in Boston, they wanted to see the Boston events. If they were in New York, they wanted to see the New York events. And that's one of the things that we were able to do using this because it tokenizes that. Another thing is that there's a whole bunch of pre-canned templates for how to display the data and sort of different, so you're not just stuck with the little, the little file type icon and a title and a short description. You can actually customize the fields. So if you have custom metadata, you can put that in there. If you want it laid out in a different way, different fields in different spots, you can do it that way as well. Mark, have you worked with the custom refiners?
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite things. Thanks for asking.
Oh dear God.
Way too nice to each other today.
Aw.
Who are you
Just
people?
sugary sweet. Just
The refiners are actually one of the main reasons I like these web parts, because what we'll often do, and we're going to talk through some specific examples we've built, but what we'll often do is want to show the search results in the context. You want to be able to show where they came from and what content type they have. So, you know, I'm a big fan of information architecture, so I want to be able to show you things like, you know, the HR department has these policies, or the IT department has this set of handbooks, whatever the right combination of those things are. So we can build nice and targeted search scopes, but then also offer the user some refiners that help them narrow down those result sets so that they can find exactly what they need much more easily. If you've used SharePoint Search for years, you sort of know what that feels like, but that, or they're called filters in modern SharePoint, is really a big reason to want to use these web parts. And the fact that you can create custom queries with some of those tokens that Derek mentioned, like, you know, what department I'm in or whatever, means that you can go far beyond what the highlighted content web part can do for you, because you know more about the person, you know more about the site you're in, you know more about the context that you're currently arriving at that page with than you can in any of the out-of-the-box web parts.
So can I ask Emily to kind of follow on, because we've heard from Derek and Mark, each of whom are developers, right? But the question that was on the table was, hey, as a non-developer, how useful are these to me? Emily, could you touch on that a little bit before we start getting into specific use cases? Do you care to comment on that? I think sometimes we're spoiled because we have some great developers on our team.
Absolutely. So I was talking about it a bit in the chat as well. I specialize in out-of-the-box capabilities, so I very much consider myself a non-dev. I'd say as far as I get into the dev realm is some if statements in a calculated column. So working with these modern PnP search web parts, the edit capabilities, and if we have time, I can demo them to you in my dev tenant, is very similar to other web parts. So setting up these search refiners is probably the most complex step, but again, it's all out of the box. You're going to the admin center. So I find this entry point for non-devs to be very simple, and the most complex you're going to get is maybe in what you're setting your search results to be returned as. So I commonly use, you know, SP content type. So I'm only having one parameter, and that's all very straightforward.
Cool,
Hey,
Emily, thank you. Go ahead, Derek.
Emily,
Yep.
how do you find editing the query? Because for me, like, I understand search query and how to write that search query. As someone who's a non-dev, how does that work for you?
It's a good question. I do think that's that hardest part. The example I gave was the SP content type, and then I give a colon to policy, for example, and we'll talk about that in the use cases. I haven't done more complex queries than that. If I needed much more complex ones, I probably would be asking for a little bit of help from a dev because I don't have that experience.
But Emily, I think also there's some great KQL documentation out there that I think you and I probably have both used to create a little bit more ornate queries right through the user interface as well, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I should probably add that as a resource, some of that KQL reference. You know, just formulating a good query is useful.
Yeah, and KQL is I don't remember what K stands for. What does it mean? Query language. Something K query language. So it's the same query language that's existed since SharePoint Search has been around. It's the same query language that you would have used if you used a content search web part. So this isn't some new thing to learn. It's actually relatively well established. There are lots of examples in people's blogs and things like that. If I want to find in a department or something, it's not, you're not starting from no interest.
Yep, exactly, Mark. That's the point I wanted to make, right? If you're capable of writing good queries in a search box, you're capable of writing good KQL queries.
Exactly.
And I don't remember what K stands for either. Ken's
Keyword.
Clint.
Keyword. All right.
Clint query language. It was all me.
Chat. Oh,
It was all this guy right here.
the chat is blowing up. Oy.
So let's continue hearing Emily's voice, and let's take these capabilities and turn them into use cases. So when we hear certain scenarios, we think that this is a good fit for us based on things that we've built in the past. Emily, do you want to speak to some of these?
Sure. So I'd say the top one that I use with clients is a policy center. So this idea that a bunch of different departments own policies, but as someone who works at that organization, I want one spot to go find them all together. Really similar standard operating procedures. So this idea that we have everything decentralized with the content authors, and then we're presenting that one entry point. We were talking about some of the more complex business process tracking options. So for content translation tracking, we were talking about this use case of, let's say I have a bunch of different groups that have a document that needs to be translated, and I'm working with it in my team, in my site. And then I also want to go build another site where I'm working with that translator, and all these different departments are actually putting those documents that need to be translated there. How cool to have this one centralized place to pull all of those documents that I have access to from the team sites or that translator site, and maybe one of the site columns I'm using is status, and I put that in the refiner. So although all of these different documents are at different stages of the process with different groups, I can make this one page where I can get that high level scope of what's happening where. There are also some situations where we just might be centralizing that information, and we don't necessarily want to have it be searched or refined. We're just pulling the results to make it easy for someone to consume. Mike, do you have any that you would add to our common use cases that you're seeing with our clients?
I think really this goes to the next slide, the now famous slide 7, is wherever the ownership and management of that content is distributed, but you want to roll it up into one central place without having to mess with permission, with leaving the permissions intact. This is some of what we're talking about, right? Policies and SOPs are two great examples in compliance-driven organizations. I think we had not quite consensus around the expert finder capabilities because of the lack, some things that were lacking in how people cards are rendered, at least in the last version of the Search PnP web parts.
We like it better now that we've seen that version 4 supports the people card.
Okay, good. All right. So Emily, let's speak. Go ahead, Derek.
It does offer because it offers a whole bunch of pre-canned templates. One of the things that it does offer is a specific people layout. So you can get something that looks very similar to the persona card, but you have the ability to then pop in your own custom metadata. So you could add things like skills or physical location or something, phone number, something that's in the user profile. So you could use that to maybe do a department search if you had a large department. Very, very specific and on your site page for, say, HR. You could put that in there.
Web parts that we often put on the homepage of a department site is the people web part, but that requires manual maintenance, right? You have to make sure that if somebody leaves or somebody switches jobs or something, you go in and you change that. So if you think about dropping a search results web part in that page instead, that is filtered to show everybody in that department, it's got the people card capability in version 4 now. We figured that out today. So you could have a dynamic people web part in essence, so that you don't have to manage it as long as your data is good, which is always a big if. But so there are definitely lots of different ways you can use these web parts in different combinations to accomplish different things.
Yeah, now that that version 4, can't wait to update mine in my dev tenant after this meeting, because one common use I see people do is on those communication sites making an about the team page and then manually adding everybody and then forgetting as people come and leave the company. So if you were just pulling and filtering it to department, for example, great, now you never need to touch that again and it's always up to date, which is pretty fantastic.
Let's talk a bit more about that pattern of decentralized data surfaced centrally. Emily, this is slide 7.
Yeah, slide 7. Here we are.
The slide 7.
I've sat down in preparation for how this is just going to knock me.
I love when we overhype my slides before I dive into them.
No pressure.
So starting out with a concept that we're talking about, right? In the SharePoint modern world, we have all of our separate site collections. Ideally, we're trying to keep our permissions at the site level, and we want to pair permissions with responsibility. So if I'm in HR, I'm responsible for some of our internal policies, like maybe our short-term disability or kind of leave of absence policies. Then there's someone else in corporate communications. They're responsible for our social media policy. That should be on their site. But again, as an employee of, let's call it Simpraxis, we don't want to have to go to all of these different departments and find out what applies to me. So we're making the content where people have access to edit and update it. So we're removing that friction of them relying on other people to post their updated content. And then we're solving for that end user view by pulling everything that is a policy. So when we implement this, what we typically do is create a content type. And in this one, let's call it policy. Maybe you have some site columns on there like version number, document number, expiration date. You'll then want to use that same content type so that we can have the search based off of it. You can do this a couple different ways. The former way was to do it in the content type hub, and that's admittedly where I started when I was using the modern PnP search web part, but it can be pretty frustrating. That is going to be published to the site. Super not fun. I do not recommend that route anymore. I am a bigger fan of site designs or the PnP provisioning templates to get those content types across. I personally, as a non-dev, really like the site designs, especially because I can add the site design to the tenant. So anyone can see it as a drop-down like, ooh, policy library. I have a policy I want to share, and they can self-serve themselves to get that library and content type added to their site and then add a document. Then you build a page in the communication site. So the one that we're looking at right now, if you pop to the next slide, Mike, we have 3 different web parts. So at the top, that's where we're putting in our query. The left, we have our refiners. The right, we have our results. You don't have to have all of these web parts on a page, but in this use case, we wanted people to narrow down across the different owners of the policy. So those are the different departments at this Kintoso Travel, or go in that search term at the top. So maybe you don't know the name of the policy that you're looking for, but you know a topic that it's covering. So maybe I'm trying to look for something like work remote policy, and I don't really know which one that's going to be. And so if I type in work remote in the search terms, it will pull up those documents where it references that. So this is that one unified entry point for people to go through and consume all of their different documents.
So before we continue the dive and talk about some of the other resources here, I'd like to open it up. And Julie, I'm sure, like usual, you've been tracking the chat thread on here. Are there any outstanding questions either in the chat, or people feel free to come off of mute and
we had someone wanted to know if we were going to cover search verticals and result source identifiers. Excuse me. Mark put some info in the chat, but I don't think we're talking about that specifically. Or
we could talk about really quickly. So search verticals would be, here we have travel policies, but we could have a search vertical, which would be that tab thing that would probably be right underneath the search box that might have, travel policies. Those would be the verticals. So it'd be different slices, not based on user selecting refiners, but different scopes on that same wider scope within the page. So it's very much like what you get with the Microsoft 365 search, where you get the tabs across the top.
Files, sites, people, conversations, etc.
And then the question about result sources. A result source has a GUID, and you can specify that result source in your query. Derek and I did that in that project he was talking about earlier. So it's just another way to sort of scope the query that you're using based on that result source that you've defined in the Search Admin Center.
Any other questions?
No, that covers. I think we've covered most of them.
Cool. Emily, do you want to do any live demo? We have a few minutes left. If you want to take people behind the curtains a little bit. I'm talking high wire without a net here, of course.
Let's do it.
We have somebody else who has a bigger question too here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hit
cool.
that one first.
This is a long question. I'll try reading it. I have created tabs for all items, pages, people, videos, pictures, and recently changed items, and used the default site result source in the result source identifier column, and in the query template column, I gave this search terms path, site collection URL. I connected this vertical to a simple list view of search results web part. My question is, what do I need to change? Or if I create new result sources for all those tabs, make all those load from a specific site collection, because the results I see are coming from different sites in the tenant. What should I put in this for respective result sources? Whew, that's a long question.
Let me dig into that while Emily's doing a little bit of a demo so that I can answer it. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. It's a pretty in-depth question.
Yeah.
All right, so Emily, I'll hand off the sharing to you.
Don't apologize, Biggie. It's a good question.
All right, so this is the tour from the non-dev perspective. So my dev friends, feel free to pepper in as we go. So here, just as an example of putting this page into context, this is Contoso Travel. This is their intranet homepage where they have all their news and different information. Up at the top here under travel assistance, we have a travel policy center. Going into this page, I'm just expanding some of our filters over here to the left. And these are actually the different site titles of where they're coming from. So for example, if I want to see only the travel policies, it is now filtering down to those items. One of my favorite parts about these web parts is this huge, rich preview of looking into the documents and then being able to click it and open it in a new tab full screen. So again, really removing that friction for people to pogo stick around until they find their best content and most applicable. I'm going to go into edit mode here for a moment and just talk about how each of these are set up. So up here, we have our search box. And I don't have anything specific set up here. We have our search filters to the left, and I've connected it to my search results web part. So that way, whatever I filter, it shows up in the right. And then I do want it to show blank if no result. And you can choose kind of that layout of whether you want this to be this little panel option or the vertical. I like the vertical because it provides a stronger information sent so people can upfront see what they can filter and how. Over here on the right, this is where we have our search results. So you'll notice when I first came into this page, I had all of these results here, and I have this little bit of text here that shows a star. I like populating everything instead of people coming to a blank page, because again, it's about information sent. Maybe they just want to browse everything that's available. This gives them that entry point right away. So for my search query keywords, I put in that star to return all results. Then in my next page, this is where we dive into that little query spot. And I was mentioning that a lot of my queries tend to be pretty simple because I'm basing it off of one content type. But if we want to be a little bit further, then some of that KQL documentation can better support it. Continuing down again on the right, you'll see this all matches a lot of the look and feel and handles of how the other web parts are. So even as a non-dev, it's pretty intuitive for me to navigate around. I'm not writing code to set this up. So here again, I'm connecting this to search refiners to make sure that those results are getting reduced. And then under select properties, this is where I'm picking out all of the different properties that I want this web part to gather as it's looking for results. You do need to select the properties that you want to refine. So make sure that you're selecting all of those filters over here first. You can control your paging, which is great, and control some of your navigation buttons. And then this last page is what we keep talking about when we're talking about that results layout. So we were mentioning that this people layout has been improved. And then for the super devs, you can make your own custom layouts as well.
So before you leave this screen, just to show, did we show for Sharon where the preview feature is enabled in the search results web part configuration pane?
The preview document?
Yeah, that's just out of the box, isn't it? You don't enable
It is.
that.
It
just
depends.
works.
Yeah, it depends on which template you use, whether it's there.
Which
so
layout?
here with simple
Certain
list,
layouts. Gotcha.
Yeah. I'm
so
a
it's
big
right
fan.
there on the right hand side.
Exactly. I'm a big fan of simple list. And let me just click through a couple of those live for you to see. So right now we're simple list. That's detail list. So I'm getting some more of these different columns. I don't like it as much. It shows you like the summary, some of the content in the document, but I think people are cued off those visuals and page layouts a little bit more often than just the words. You also have this tile layout, which can be pretty good if you have a low number of results. And again, they're very visually based and you want to highlight a lot of this information. And you can see on each of these, there's a link to the sites as well. So if I actually wanted to learn more about company donation in general, not just our policy, I have that information sent that my Give department takes care of that, and I can go jump over there and check it out. I never recommend carousel. People will see 90% is just the first result. So I would avoid that unless you have a really, really strong use case, and I haven't heard one yet.
Emily, you could use that as an image carousel.
That's true. That's a
If
great
you
strong
had-
use case.
Yeah,
Well done.
but I think with that one, there's no ability to have an automatic advance unless they've added. So it's just a fixed thing. So people think, well, that's the answer.
Yeah.
So
There are some good signifiers where they're showing us the preview, a partial of the items to the left and the right, these big arrows, and the pagination on the bottom. So from a UX perspective, they definitely gave as many clues as you possibly could. But to Mark's point, sometimes if people are going quickly or not really paying attention to this, they could miss that additional content.
Cool.
All right, we are at 2 minutes before the hour, so we're right on target. This has been awesome. Thanks for showing us live and in real time, Emily. I'll take over the sharing again after the slides, unless you want to do it. You just want to pop that slide into presenter mode.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. I got two screens.
No problem. You got it, or you want me to do?
You please.
Okay, coming at you.
Ooh, and KQL quick reference.
Yep, threw that in the chat.
Awesome.
So a couple of the resources we dropped in here, how to get to the modern search web parts. This is a link to the repo, the first thing, and the second is a blog post that Mark wrote in a little bit more detail about refiners for site name and content types using them. Any other resources? Well, I'll add the KQL. I threw it in the chat. I'll add it to this slide for when we publish these slides as well.
Yeah, we publish the links underneath the on our website. We publish all the links there too, so you
Perfect.
can get them that way. Yep.
So in 2 weeks, we're going to have a new topic. It'll be about file share migration. I would probably say to SharePoint and OneDrive, given the structure of most file shares. But Todd, I think you're going to be leading, and because we didn't hear a lot from you today, we'll have an IT pro centric Ask Simpraxis in the next
We'll
one.
fix that next time.
That's right.
This terrible wrong that has been done.
We will right that wrong.
Yep.
And as always, if today triggered additional questions on your part, ideas or suggestions for new Ask Simpraxis topics, please submit them using the link at the bottom of this slide. These are by and, well, the topics are generally by and for our clients, people in the community. So we love to hear your ideas, your thoughts, and we love to kind of geek out and drill down on these things too at your request.
Cool.
Anything else in the chat to cover?
Nope, nothing new. Mark's been on top of it, so I think
Phenomenal.
we're good. Yep.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to everybody on the team who prepped and presented. Thanks everybody for joining us. Please bring your ideas, your questions, your feedback every time.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank you,
great week.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.